Dr. Rachael, I want to welcome you back to the program, Temperament 101. So good to have you back.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we have discussed the melancholy. We've discussed the sanguine in all three areas, inclusion, control, and affection. Now it's time to move on to the supine. So what are some of those characteristics or typical things that we see in the supine? As you know, we've had a lot of them come into our practice. We see supines all the time.
Yes, we do. Yeah, that is one temperament that we see a lot of. So just looking at my notes down here, just to make sure I don't leave anything off, the supine has a great need for love, affection, approval, feeling appreciated, recognized. They tend to present with a lot of indirect behavior, indirect output toward the world, and so they are misread by the world. So their intentions behind the mask that they wear are really not expressed at all, either verbally or physically. So they tend to not initiate. They tend to hold their thoughts internally and not express them. And so they are oftentimes very conflicted inside because they want to be a part of the group desperately, but they do things that make people think that they don't want to be involved.
And the reason for that quietness is because of fear and feelings of worthlessness. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Not that every single one is like that, but there is a tendency, if you are supine, to have low self-esteem because, that's who you are as an individual. You don't have a high opinion of yourself, so we could also say that it's a beautiful temperament because the supine is naturally very humble.
The supine really is a beautiful temperament. They're very quiet people. They tend to have just a servant's heart, very, very tender-hearted, very gentle, and really, if you think in terms of a servant serving a king, that's how they think of themselves. It's called the bowing temperament, and so you just picture them as bowing to the king or bowing to the world, and they do that one because they really do want to serve other people, and that is a big motivator for them. But they also they think of themselves as less than everyone, so they would never be king. And they would never be comfortable in the king's throne, but they will always choose a servant's role.
When we think about the supine and the sanguine and their needs, it's almost identical. What they need from others is almost exactly the same thing, but the difference is the supine does not have the assertiveness that the sanguine has. What are some ways that you would recommend a supine address their lack of assertiveness, their inability to speak and be heard by others?
Yeah, it really, if you can picture a kid on Christmas morning where they are just so excited, but they have to wait until their parents say they can go and open their gifts, okay? It's kind of like that. So the supine has all this excitement and everything to offer, and yet it's just contained, and they have to be told how to tell the world what is actually going on inside them. And it's different from the melancholy because the melancholy just really doesn't want to say what's going on.
It's not that they can't, they just don't want to.
It's not that they can't. The supine really does, but they don't know how to do that. And so teaching them how to say, for instance, if they see their friends are going to lunch together and they're normally included in lunch plans, the supine's going to sit back and wait for a literal invitation, a personal invitation. Whereas everyone else kind of gets the idea that in general everyone's welcome to lunch, and so they just kind of join up on their own. Supine, no way. They are going to sit at their desk and wait for a personal invitation. So
the answer is they have to step out of their comfort zone a little bit and be bold.
Right. So that's what we have to teach them is, hey, you don't always have to have that personal invitation. You can actually go and say, is it all right if I join you? It looks like fun, something like that. But that's really uncomfortable for them.
Mm-hmm. Like that passage that we mentioned when we were doing the other session, God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power and a sound mind.
Yes.
And so we have to operate in that power that God gives us by means of His Spirit. And another passage that I really like to use with my clients is Joshua 1:9. Be strong and courageous. And he says, have I not told you? Courage is lacking in a lot of people nowadays, it seems.
Right. And a lot of people misunderstand that courage, too, because courage is not an absence of fear, but it's actually having that fear. And, the supine temperament is one that I really love. I feel for them, but I would imagine that a lot of our first responders have supine somewhere in their temperament.
Wow. What about feelings of anger? Because we know that anger is also something that the supine are oftentimes struggling with. How is that different from a melancholy anger? And I'll just preface that by saying, the melancholy, or the supine is really a blending of the melancholy and the sanguine. They have traits from both of those. It's kind of right in the middle. But they tend to have the anger at least similar to the melancholy. But how does it differ?
Yeah, so a melancholy does have, issues with anger. Melancholy will also seek vengeance on people, but not so the supine. The supine tends to be a brooder, like someone who will just seethe with internal rage. They will actually do more self-harm and really not act outwardly on their anger. They drive it all inward. So
more so than the melancholy would, because we know
melancholy
ruminate and seethe in anger
do,
as
but
well.
it does eventually come out, but not the supine. The supine will harm themselves. They will just brood about things. They are highly offended. Much of the time, I would say every day, they are offended by something. And so they just really struggle with that, mostly because they just have no natural outlet for how they are feeling. They don't know how to show the world what's going on inside them, and yet they are so wanting to be around others, which is very different from the melancholy. Melancholy does not need to be around very many people at all. And supine is always looking to be with others. They want to be a part of what's going on, and yet they constantly feel shut out.
And they don't know how to initiate.
They don't. They're
not assertive. And also you were talking about that self-destructiveness of holding everything in. A lot of clients that come in who have cutting disorders or they're hurting themselves in some way, those are supines, right?
Almost 100% of the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the supine, phlegmatic, and inclusion. What would be some of the differences between a pure supine in inclusion and supine phlegmatic?
So pure supine in inclusion is going to want to be a part of the crowd, but they are not going to initiate, right? And they are going to be very frustrated by that. And they're going to feel lonely most of the time, and just really almost like a fish out of water, almost like no one understands them, that kind of thing. But a supine phlegmatic is going to have the benefit of the phlegmatic, which is a little bit more indifferent, does not require so much social interaction to feel satisfied. And so all of those tormenting feelings of being left out or not included or offended by people not inviting them places, all of that's going to be watered down a little bit, so those feelings are not quite so strong.
So the struggles of the supine are likely going to be a lot worse than a supine phlegmatic.
Definitely.
You're going to see more propensity for the difficulty of indirect behavior, of those feelings of worthlessness and pain, and even anger. You're going to see probably less anger for a supine phlegmatic in inclusion. Okay, let's turn it around and say the phlegmatic is in the expressed area rather than in the received or wanted area of inclusion. What does that person look like?
So the phlegmatic is going to be somewhat indifferent toward being included in social interactions. They are still going to want some assurance from others, but having that supine, they're actually going to be responding as a supine. So they will be responding to, even though they may be a little bit indifferent, the supine is going to make them want to be a part of things, but not know how to ask, remember. So it's going to be a little bit more tormented. They can't fully be indifferent. They are going to be wanting more from others around them, and they're going to want to be a part of things more.
So we would say definitely when it comes to the phlegmatic supine, they're going to be more needy, more demanding on others than the supine phlegmatic would.
Yes.
Okay. And what would you say in the control area? Like, what are some of the hallmarks, the typical behaviors of a supine in control?
Supine in control is going to be a little bit more slow-paced. They are going to be able to make decisions but feel insecure a lot of the time, not able to make decisions for the future of their life, for instance, very easily. They're always going to be second-guessing. Is this right? If somebody questions, are you sure you want to do that? They'll easily back away from that decision. They really are looking for help to make, especially important decisions for their life. But remember, they're not going to know how to ask. These are not people who are going to naturally seek out a mentor.
But we do often see that supines in control are drawn to cholerics in control, or
and
cholerics.
That's why. That's exactly
or
why.
cholerics in inclusion, people who express
Yes.
in their inclusionary because they see that person is a decider,
That's
has
right.
a strong will.
And they recognize the fact that they need help in that area and that they feel better when they can do that. So the supine in control has a lot to offer, but just doesn't want to bear the full responsibility of decisions. But they do want to be included in decision making, and that's even with their own lives. They are happy to take the thoughts and directives from a choleric, but they still want to be a part of the process.
You've probably seen a lot of supines in control in your practice in the course of your ministry. What are some ways that you have counseled them as they have confronted or have been forced to confront manipulative and abusive people? Because we know that's a big challenge for a supine in control. What are some strategies that you would advise them to undertake?
It really is. So, our feelings are indicators of things that are going right, needs being met, or things that are wrong that need to be changed because those needs are either not being met or being trampled on. And the supine is really one that struggles a lot with being trampled on. And so when steamrolled, when they have those needs that are innate to all of us, but those needs of love and attention and approval and recognition is a big one for the supine. When those needs are not being met, that's when they get angry, but they don't feel angry, they don't think they feel angry. They think they feel hurt. And so that's how they couch all of that.
So they're really angry and they don't even recognize their own anger.
No, they don't. And in fact, I would go so far as to say feeling anger to them is not acceptable. And that's why they turn it into, well, I'm not angry, I'm hurt, because it's got to be a sidestep. Because if they were truly angry and expressed outwardly how they are actually feeling, then they would experience rejection. So they couch everything as being hurt. One of the things that we work on is changing that language to, well, you're saying that you're hurt, but let's go a little bit deeper. Let's recognize anger as anger and actually get out of the gray with them. They are so indirect and just they absolutely function, but also wallow in the gray. They're natural victims. That they have to learn how to be specific with what they are actually feeling, identify it, and then at the point of contact, at that point of feeling, learn how to actually act in a way that asserts themselves in an acceptable manner toward others. So speaking truth, not being indirect. Learning how to be assertive, not aggressive. Learning how to just speak up. Maybe not even voicing the entire truth, but just speak up. Just say something that is representative of how you are and how you're thinking and how you're feeling, just so that other people can understand them better.
Is this struggle that they have to speak up something exclusive to the pure supine in control, or does the supine phlegmatic in control also have that same challenge?
I would say they both do, but different motivations. So the pure supine certainly is not naturally going to speak up. And that's out of fear. That's fear-based. But if you have phlegmatic as part of that blend, the phlegmatic just doesn't really care. So it's not a fear-based thing. They're just not going to care.
They're apathetic.
Yeah, they are. Really indifferent. And so you have indifference and then fear, that combination. So it's a little bit better having a blend just because it makes it easier for that person to experience rejection or offense, or it's easier for them to handle it emotionally. They don't feel so slighted from people or so rejected.
Right. What about in the case of the phlegmatic supine in control? Would you say that that's pretty similar, or is it going to be the way that they respond, being supine, it's going to be more difficult for them since a supine phlegmatic has in the received area phlegmatic, they're not going to struggle as much as the phlegmatic supine.
Right. So the phlegmatic supine in control is going to be making decisions based off of a lot of just self-preservation. How much energy I have to expend on whatever task. And they can be either task or people-oriented, if you remember, but having that supine part of the blend at the end is going to have them be much more relationally oriented, which is going to affect their decisions, but it's also just going to increase the indirective, or am I saying that right? The indirect approach to solving problems and actually affecting the world around them. They're going to be not as understood as a phlegmatic, where if you looked at a phlegmatic, they might join in, they might not. The phlegmatic supine, you're really not going to know if they want to be there or not. They're just going to be giving mixed signals.
Right. Very aloof.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the common characteristics of the supine in affection. Like, when you hear this person is a supine in affection, what are some of their typical traits and the ways that they behave in life and with the people around them?
Supines in affection, and this part really kind of breaks my heart because the supine in affection is absolutely tormented until they learn how to handle things differently, handle themselves differently.
Right.
So they want love. They have no idea how to initiate with other people to get what they want, whether it's a friendship or a romantic situation or even in their own family. So they are not going to initiate anything relationship-wise. And then they want all this affection and attention, but they're not going to say anything.
So same thing
anyone.
in principle with what's going on in the inclusion area. So if you have a supine in inclusion and in affection, it's someone who struggles with their surface relationships, with the people that they interact with on a daily basis in the workplace and so on, to socialize. And they're having in principle, the same kinds of struggles with their deeper relationships, like a spouse, kids, aunts and uncles and grandmas and grandpas and all that. Wouldn't you say it's pretty much the same idea there?
It is. And the only exception I would just throw in there is that the supine in affection, when they feel that they can trust the other person, that's when they can kind of let go of that fear mask, that wall, and really have a great relationship.
So those feelings of worthlessness can go away when there's love that's detected by the supine in affection, right?
Yes. The supine in affection is often dumbfounded by having friends walk away or out of their lives, or having a falling out with someone, and they're not understanding that what they are showing the world is actually producing the opposite effect of what they want.
And so we often call that neurotic behavior, right? Because they do the exact opposite of what they should do, and they get exactly the opposite of what they want.
That's exactly right.
They drive people away from them instead of bringing them closer to themselves.
They are the last to know or understand that what they are doing is actually causing the pain in their lives.
What about when it comes to their confidence? Supines in affection, they need confidence in order to have a productive relationship with the people around them, or to advance in a romantic relationship to the point of the seriousness of engagement and marriage and so on. How do we advise a supine in affection to increase their self-value, their confidence?
Well, yeah, a supine and confidence, those two words just don't really go together at all.
I know. This is a hard one.
But they ultimately need to gain their confidence from the Lord, understanding that they are made beautifully, and that understanding even their temperament and how their servant's heart is just so dear to the Lord that they are automatically approved of, that they are automatically accepted. If they can embrace that and actually believe it on a heart level, and ultimately love themselves that way, that's how they in turn can love others.
How can they learn how to feel safe emotionally so that they can open up to the people that they really want to share their feelings with and have a stronger relationship with them? Like, what would be some steps that you would advise, or some pointers that you would give them to open up themselves and show the true sweet supine within?
Yeah, well, so the supine really does need others in their lives to help them live their lives, their best lives. So finding people who bring the best inside the supine out is important. So the company they keep.
So they really need a cooperative environment where people are working with them.
They do, yeah. They're not going to do well in hostile situations. Now they can tackle hostile jobs, but relationally they need very safe people. And it's been my experience that most of them have only a few safe friends, safe people that they let in, but they don't need many. They really don't. Now they want more than what they have, but just a few make the biggest difference.
Right. So now let's talk about the supine phlegmatic infection. How different is a supine phlegmatic infection from just a typical supine infection?
So the fear of rejection is going to be a little bit less.
Okay.
Because of the phlegmatic blend there on the end. And their self-criticism is going to be lessened as well, which is a big tormentor to them.
Because the phlegmatic doesn't feel feelings of worthlessness. They don't care what other people think about them.
Yeah, not really.
They don't have a low ego. So when you blend that phlegmatic in there, it's just like
it lessens it lessens the harshness.
Right.
So supine phlegmatic is a kinder supine to themselves, if that makes sense.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So they can just be kinder to themselves. And that's what it just boils down to, is they are very harsh on themselves. And they do respond to punishment. So, and it can just be a threat of punishment. They're quick to change their tune. So they are very teachable. They're very teachable. And that's really such a godsend for this temperament, because as hard as they are, they want to do things that improve other people's lives. So I love that God made them teachable so that then they can have their lives changed too.
Absolutely. And again, just because you have a certain temperament doesn't mean you're consigned to live a certain way.
Right.
The rest of your life. God gave us the ability to change our behavior, change our thinking so that our behavior can be affected and that people around us can see a Christ-like image.
Absolutely. Yes. The supine truly is a servant leader.
Okay.
That would be a great strength.
Right. In the case of the supine and the supine phlegmatic, neither one of those initiate love very well. They do respond well.
Yes.
Which one out of the two would you say responds more to love? Would it be the supine, pure supine, or the supine phlegmatic? Which one is the more apt to respond to expressions of love from others?
Well, for sure, the supine.
Okay.
Because the supine is just looking for that all the time. And the supine phlegmatic just has a lessened desire, a lessened need for so much love and attention. They might be able to initiate things a little bit easier, but the pure supine won't initiate it, but they just long for it all the time.
But both of them for sure are capable of responding to love.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
What about the phlegmatic supine infection? Is there a vast difference between that one and the other two as far as the ability to respond to love or initiate love?
Yes, so the phlegmatic supine is really not going to have such a huge, overwhelming need for love and affection and attention. They're just happy to get along and be okay. But then having the supine tacked on there makes them a little bit more needy, and but not knowing really how to ask others as to how to meet that need.
Right. So really, a lot of the challenges of the phlegmatic supine are going to be similar to the challenges of a pure phlegmatic. The people in the relationship, let's say the spouse and the children, they're going to be seeing them the way that you would just see a regular phlegmatic, right? They
will, yeah. The phlegmatic supine is still going to be a little bit like Eeyore a little,
From Winnie the Pooh?
Yes. So they're just going to be kind of to themselves and have that sort of woe is me type attitude.
But they need expressions of love.
Yes, they do.
Okay, thank you so much for being here again, and I'm looking forward to us continuing this series.
Me too. It's been fun.
All right.